This video is a tutorial for the tablefiles shortcut file, which is included in the shortcut files library of the Inline Scripts plugin. The tablefiles shortcut file allows loading files of tables either individually or as a collection in a folder. It provides customizability for a number of things, including weighted tables and even for rolling folders of files as if they were tables of items. For this demonstration, I've created a number of table files, including this one, which I'll start with. The only stipulation for a table file is that every item needs to exist on its own line, which it does, so let's begin. First, I'll register the table file with the system, and then I'll roll it. So when you roll, it brings up this panel, which has a lot of features, but at its simplest, you could just click on the roll button or press the enter button and it rolls to pick one or more items from the table. There are some basic parameters for the roll on these lines. For instance, you can roll more than one item at a time. You can make sure that no item is picked more than once. You can use the standard expansion formatting, and you can decide how the output is actually formatted. So let's roll with these new options. You notice now we have 5 items. None of them are repeats. They're using the standard expansion formatting, which is how we get this bar on the left and a double new line at the end. And they're bulleted because we chose that format. Notice that the roll panel remembers the settings that we used for the last roll, and this way you can re-roll with the same settings. So this time let's turn off unique picks, set the pick count to 10, turn off use expansion format, and try one of the other pick formats. Let's try comma separated. And the result is 10 items, comma separated, replacements allowed, and without the standard expansion format, so we don't see that blue bar on the left, and it doesn't have the double new line at the end. Let's try one more time with the last pick format, which is perioded list. This is a variation on standard bullets, which uses periods instead, and it can sometimes be useful in formatting. In addition to registering table files, you can register folders of tables, like this one right here. You do it in the same way. You just pass in the folder path instead of the file path. And incidentally, it'll let you know if it doesn't recognize the path. Now that we have multiple tables, there's one other shortcut that's useful to know. Table list will list all the paths that are registered. It doesn't show you the individual tables, just the table paths. For the individual tables, you can go to the table roll panel, and you can see all the tables you can roll from. And just like with the other settings, when you roll again, it remembers the table that you last rolled. So that's the basics of the table file system, but there's a lot more to it. If you click on this table configuration button, there are a bunch of settings that you can set up for each table, starting with the title, which defines how the table is displayed in the list. And the description allows for more detailed information. The path is not editable, but it lets you see where the table comes from. The filter tags lets you set up custom filtering. For instance, if we go to tech and give it the same filter tags, then we go up to filters, we could say items, and now we could see both items basic and tech. We can do the same thing with objects, and then we can add a separate filter for basic, right? If the table file has a header section, for instance here, then the table settings allows you to define what line to start reading from. You could just click up and down to change the line to start with. The final setting is the item format. For this setting, I'm going to load a separate set of tables. These tables include weights on one side and on the other side, and then we have one table that's in an unusual format. So you see by default an item is just the entire line, but the item format lets you modify that, and in fact it has a couple presets, basic item, a couple weighted items, and a couple paths that we'll get into later. The weighted items 1 to 5 is akin to what we're looking at, so we'll choose that. And when we set that, it actually has a custom regex, which is an item format as a regex that defines how to parse each item to pull out the item part and the range part. And notice we only need the second number of the range because the first number is always just one more than the previous item's range. So yeah, this format is designed to pull out the item and the range, and when we roll it, you'll notice that we get a lot of hits and weak hits, but we don't get much, if any, of the criticals. And that's just due to the weights that are given in the table. As another example, the NPC class, you can see that the weights are now at the beginning. We have a different format for that. That's the 1 to 5 weighted item. And just like with the attack results, we got a lot of manual and mental laborers and not a lot of nobles or wizards, due to the weights used in the table. As the final example, table conditions had that odd format. There was actually a markdown table. So the first thing is we have to set the starting line to skip the first couple lines because that's just the header of the table. And then we'll write a custom item format to pull out the meat of the item. And the results you could see in the sample item. And when we run this, we're just getting that first column of the table. Okay, so that's it for the table settings. There are just a few other features. There's a special type of table item that you can see right here. It starts with tilde pick and replace tilde, and then it has the name of another table. And when the table file system sees this item, it actually picks from this other table and replaces the contents of this with what it picked. So if the first item is picked, then it picks from this other table of non-animals. If the second item is picked, it actually goes to the data tables animals table here, and it picks one of these animals. You'll notice that in the first case we have the implicit MD extension, and in the second case we don't. I just wanted to demonstrate that you don't have to have it, but you can. And finally, if you just give the table name, it will expect it to be in the same folder as the current table, in this case living things. But you can have a full path if the table is in a different folder. So let's try this out. And when we roll it, we have living things, and we're going to change this to comma separated and 10. And when we roll that, we get some animals, duck, lizard, duck. We get some non-animals, vine and seaweed and tree, because it's pulling from both the non-animals and the animals tables. Okay, and there's one final feature that lets you take a folder of files and treat it as if it was a table of items. Add folder table. And if we give it a path of a folder, we're going to give it this path because it's filled with a bunch of files of different items. And if we take a look at the paths list, that path is included as a special folder table path. Folder tables look like any other tables, except for they have this parenthesis folder table in the title. And if you go into the settings, the path begins with tilde folder. And we'll roll 5 items. And this time let's use bulleted list, just to mix things up. So each folder table item is actually represented as a link with the base name of the folder and then the full path to the folder. And we can actually mix that up a little bit. The item format has 2 regular expression presets, base file name and full file name, that pull the base name or the full file name from a folder table. For instance, now we're not getting links, we're just getting the base file names. And that's pretty much it for the table file system. I hope that helps. Thanks for watching.